Admiral Sarah stood at the massive viewing window of the space station, watching the most amazing sight she had ever seen. Below her, ships from 12 different alien races worked together, building something beautiful in the darkness of space. Human engineers floated alongside creatures that looked like living crystals. Earth's soldiers shared meals with beings that breathed methane instead of oxygen. This was Nexus Prime, the heart of the Galactic Council, and somehow, impossibly, humans were now part of it. Sarah remembered the day everything changed. It was only 50 years ago when humanity first broke free from Earth's gravity and reached for the stars. Most species took thousands of years to develop space travel. Humans did it in mere decades. When the Council first detected human radio signals, they expected to find another primitive world. Instead, they found ships already heading to nearby star systems. The Council sent ambassador to make first contact. Sarah was there that day, a young lieutenant watching from the background as the tall, skinned alien stepped off his ship. His words still rang in her memory. "Your species shows promise," he had said in perfect English. "The Council wishes to extend an invitation." The invitation changed everything. Humanity went from being alone in the universe to being the 13th member of the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. The other 12 species had been working together for over 10,000 years. They had technologies that seemed like magic, ships that could travel faster than light, computers that could think, medicine that could cure any disease. In exchange, Earth offered something the Council had never seen before. While each alien species was very good at one thing, humans were good at many things. They could build perfect energy shields, but they took centuries to design them. Humans looked at the same problem and found 10 different solutions in a few months. The Oran had mastered genetics over millions of years. They could create life forms perfectly suited for any environment. But when humans studied their work, they found ways to make the process faster and more efficient. What took the Oran decades, humans could do in weeks. "Your people are unusual," Chancellor told Sarah during one of their meetings. The old alien's 4 eyes studied her carefully. "Most species specialize, you generalize. Most species perfect slowly, you adapt quickly." Sarah had smiled at the time. She thought it was a compliment. The Council gave humanity 7 star systems to develop. They were frontier worlds, far from the center of galactic civilization. The Council said it was because humans were still new and needed to learn. But Sarah suspected it was really because they wanted to see what humans would do with empty space. What humans did was amazing. In just 5 years, those 7 systems became the most productive in Council space. Humans didn't just build colonies. They built networks. Each world specialized in something different, but they all worked together. Mining worlds sent resources to factory worlds. Factory worlds sent finished goods to research stations. Research stations sent new technologies back to Earth. The Council members were impressed but also confused. Most species developed one world completely before moving to the next. Humans seemed to develop everything at once. It was chaos, but somehow it worked. Sarah's favorite project was the Joint Research Station at 442b. Human scientists worked alongside the greatest minds from 11 other species. They were supposed to be studying ancient history, looking for clues about how the galaxy formed. But Sarah loved visiting because it showed humanity at its best. Human researchers didn't just study one thing. They studied everything and found connections that others missed. Doctor led the human team. He was a small, quiet man who got excited about old rocks and dead languages. But he had a gift for seeing patterns that others couldn't see. While the historians focused on political records and the archaeologists studied technology artifacts, looked at everything together. "History isn't just politics or technology," he explained to Sarah during one visit. "It's people, how they lived, what they believed, why they made the choices they made. You have to see the whole picture." The whole picture of the Council was impressive. 12 ancient species, each bringing their own strengths to the alliance. The hegemony provided leadership and wisdom. The created the most beautiful architecture in the galaxy. The Iran designed living ships that could heal themselves. The built computers that could think faster than biological minds. Together they had created the longest period of peace in galactic history. No wars, no conflicts, no suffering, just cooperation and progress. It seemed perfect. Sarah often walked through the gardens on Nexus Prime, where plants from hundreds of worlds grew together in harmony. The air recycling systems used biotechnology. The climate control was managed by computers. The soil came from dozens of different planets, mixed together to create something new and better. It reminded her of humanity itself. Humans were a mixture, taking the best from everywhere and making something new. That was their gift to the Council. Not just new technology or faster development, but a new way of thinking. A willingness to try anything, to mix different ideas together and see what happened. The council chambers where Sarah worked every day were carved from a single crystal that grew in zero gravity. The crystal was alive, part of an organism that could live for millions of years. It glowed with soft light and hummed with a sound too low for human ears to hear, but Sarah could feel it in her bones. Standing in that chamber, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy, Sarah felt proud to be human. Her species had earned their place here through hard work and creativity. They had proven that being young didn't mean being weak. They had shown that having different ideas could make everyone stronger. The future looked bright. Humanity would continue to grow and learn. The Council would benefit from human creativity and energy. Together, they would explore new worlds, solve new problems, and build something even more amazing than what already existed. Sarah had no way of knowing that some council members were already making different plans. She didn't know about the secret meetings where ancient voices whispered about the human problem. She couldn't see the fear hiding behind the polite smiles and diplomatic words. All Sarah saw was hope and possibility. She believed in cooperation and trust. She thought the galaxy was big enough for everyone to prosper together. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. Doctor wiped sweat from his forehead as he climbed down into the cave. The underground chamber on 442B was deeper than anyone had expected. His team had been digging for 3 months, following strange energy readings that didn't match anything they had seen before. "The metal detector is going crazy down here," called out Dr. Lisa Park, his assistant. She was 20 feet ahead, her cutting through the darkness. "There's something big buried in the floor." Felt his heart beat faster. After 5 years of studying council history, he had learned to recognize the signs of an important discovery. The way the rock formations looked, the type of minerals in the soil, the age of the sediment layers. Everything about this cave suggested they had found something very old, older than the council itself. The chamber opened into a vast underground space, pointed his light upward and couldn't see the ceiling. The walls were covered in markings that looked like writing, but not from any language he knew. And there, in the center of the floor, was a metal structure that definitely didn't belong. "My God," whispered Dr. Park, "look at this." The structure was clearly artificial. It looked like a control panel or computer terminal, but the design was nothing like council technology. The symbols carved into its surface were different from the ones on the walls, more complex, more advanced. Ran his scanner over the device. The readings made him frown. According to his instruments, the metal was composed of elements that shouldn't exist in nature. The power source was still active after millions of years, and the computer core was still functional. "Doctor," called another team member from across the chamber, "you need to see this wall." Walked over to where Sarah, his linguist, was studying a section of wall covered in symbols. Her face was pale in the light of her. "I can read some of this," she said quietly. "It's similar to ancient hegemony script, but older, much older, and doctor, I don't think you're going to like what it says." Sarah had been working with council languages for years. She had learned to read the historical records of all 12 member species, but this writing was different. It felt urgent, desperate, like someone had carved these words knowing they would die soon after. "It's a warning," Sarah continued, "or maybe a confession. The beings who wrote this were trying to tell someone about something terrible that happened here." Over the next 2 weeks, his team worked around the clock to translate the writings and access the computer terminal. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The chamber was a record keeper, a database built by a species called the Architects, who had lived in this part of the galaxy millions of years ago. According to their records, this region of space had once been home to over 50 different intelligent species. Most of them were peaceful. They traded with each other, shared knowledge, and worked together to explore the stars. Then the founders arrived. The founders were the ancestors of the current Council species, but they weren't the peaceful explorers that Council history claimed they were. They were conquerors. They moved through the galaxy like a plague, destroying any species that couldn't be controlled or absorbed into their empire. The Architects had tried to fight back. They had formed an alliance with dozens of other species, combining their technologies and military forces. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the species fell. Some were completely destroyed. Others were enslaved and eventually absorbed into the founder civilization. The Architects used their last moments to build this record. They wanted someone someday to know the truth about what had really happened. Felt sick as he read the final entries. The Architects described how the founders would arrive at a new world with offers of friendship and cooperation. They would study the local species, learn about their technology and culture, and identify their weaknesses. Then, when they knew everything they needed to know, they would strike. The pattern was always the same. First, they would cut off communications and isolate the target species from potential allies. Then they would destroy the military forces with overwhelming firepower. Finally, they would either eliminate the population entirely or reduce them to slavery. The most horrifying part was how efficient they were at it. The founders had turned genocide into a science. They knew exactly how to break a species' will to resist. They knew how to use a civilization's own strengths against them. "Doctor," said Dr. Park, looking up from her translation work, "there's something else here. A list of species that were completely eliminated. It's very long." Looked at the list. Over 30 species had been completely destroyed. Their names, their worlds, their entire civilizations were wiped from the galaxy as if they had never existed. The Council history books mentioned none of them. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Hidden in the deepest part of the computer core, the Architects had stored detailed records of the founder military tactics. Read with growing horror as he learned about biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers, about nanomachines that could rewrite a species' DNA from the inside out, about psychological warfare techniques that could break a civilization's spirit before the first shot was fired. The founders hadn't just been conquerors, they had been monsters. Called Admiral immediately. The communication took 3 hours to reach Nexus Prime, and its response took another 3 hours to come back. But when it arrived, her message was clear: bring everything back to headquarters immediately. The trip to Nexus Prime was the longest week of his life. He kept thinking about all the council members he had worked with over the years, Chancellor with his 4 eyes and gentle voice, the engineers who had taught him about crystal technology, the Oran biologists who had shared their knowledge freely. Were they all descendants of genocidal monsters? Did they know what their ancestors had done? When finally arrived at Nexus Prime, Admiral was waiting for him in her private office. She looked tired and worried as she reviewed the evidence he had brought. "This is certain," she asked. "You're absolutely sure these records are authentic?" Nodded. "We've the age of the materials, cross-referenced the star charts with current galactic maps, even found genetic samples that match current council species. It's all real, Admiral. Was quiet for a long time. Could see her mind working, trying to figure out what this meant for humanity's relationship with the Council. Finally, she spoke. We have to tell them. The Council leadership needs to know that we found this. Felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Something about his expression told him she already knew how the Council would react to this discovery, and it wouldn't be good. What do you think they'll do? He asked. Admiral stared out the window at the beautiful crystal spires of Nexus Prime. When she turned back to, her face was grim. I think we're about to find out what happens when the Council's dark secrets come to light, she said, and I don't think they're going to thank us for digging them up. Admiral Sarah stood in the center of the Council chambers, holding the data crystal that contained everything Doctor had discovered. Around her, the 12 Council leaders sat in their traditional circle, their alien faces impossible to read. The chamber was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Chancellor broke the silence first, his 4 eyes focused on the crystal in Sarah's hand. These are serious accusations, Admiral, he said in his calm, measured voice. You claim to have found evidence that contradicts thousands of years of recorded history. Sarah lifted her chin. I'm not making accusations, Chancellor. I'm presenting facts. The architect records are clear. Your ancestors weren't peaceful explorers. They were conquerors who committed genocide on a massive scale. The representative, a being of living crystal named, chimed with what sounded like laughter. Young species often misinterpret ancient records. Perhaps your translation is flawed. Our translation is correct, Sarah replied firmly. We've it with 3 independent teams. We've cross-referenced the genetic samples. We've matched the star charts. Everything checks out. Commander of the Oran leaned forward, his tentacles writhing with what Sarah had learned to recognize as agitation. Even if these records are accurate, what does it matter? Those events happened millions of years ago. They have nothing to do with the Council as it exists today. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. Nothing to do with today. You built your entire civilization on the bones of murdered species. The Great Peace, you're so proud of, exists because you eliminated anyone who might have challenged it. The chamber erupted in angry chittering, buzzing, and growling as the Council members reacted to her words. But Sarah noticed that none of them what she was saying. They were angry that she had discovered the truth, not surprised by it. Chancellor raised one long-fingered hand, and the chamber fell silent. When he spoke, his voice was colder than Sarah had ever heard it. Admiral, your species is very young. You have much to learn about the complexities of galactic civilization. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good. Greater good, Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. You committed genocide. You wiped out entire civilizations. We brought order to chaos, replied. We ended conflicts that had raged for. We created the longest period of peace this galaxy has ever known. Yes, some species were incompatible with that vision, but the result speaks for itself. Sarah stared at him in horror. You're not even sorry, you think it was justified. The Chancellor's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Young Admiral, let me explain something to you. The galaxy is not a kind place. Before the Council, there was constant war. Species destroyed each other over resources, territory, ideology. We brought stability. We brought progress. We brought peace. By murdering everyone who disagreed with you. By making difficult choices that your species is not yet mature enough to understand. Stood, his tall form casting a shadow over Sarah. Which brings us to the present problem. You have discovered information that could destabilize the very foundation of galactic civilization. This cannot be allowed. Sarah felt ice in her veins. Are you threatening me, Chancellor? I am offering you wisdom, replied. Your species has 2 choices. You can accept that some truths are too dangerous to share and agree to seal these records permanently. Or what? The The Chancellor's expression didn't change, but somehow his words became even colder. Or, we will be forced to implement quarantine measures to protect the greater galaxy from the chaos your revelations would cause. Sarah looked around the chamber. Every council member was watching her with expressions that ranged from pity to barely concealed hostility. She realized with growing horror that this wasn't a debate or a discussion. It was an ultimatum. "You planned this," she said quietly. "All of it. Our integration into the council, the frontier assignments, the research projects. You wanted to see what we would discover." Nodded slowly. "Your species shows dangerous curiosity. We needed to understand how much of a threat you represented. Now we know." "And what's your conclusion?" "That humanity is indeed dangerous," the Chancellor replied. "You adapt too quickly, learn too fast, make connections that others miss. Left unchecked, you would eventually uncover truths that took us to bury." Sarah gripped the data crystal. "So what happens now?" "Now you choose, wisdom or consequences." Sarah thought about all the human colonies scattered across 7-star systems. All the families who had left Earth believing they were part of something beautiful and peaceful. All the children being born who would grow up among the stars. "I need time to consider," she said. "You have 1 standard hour," replied. "After that, we will assume you have chosen consequences." Sarah turned and walked out of the chamber, her mind racing. As soon as she was out of sight, she activated her emergency communicator and sent a coded message to every human military commander in Council space. Protocol 7. Execute immediately. Protocol 7 was humanity's deepest secret. While the Council thought they were monitoring all human communications and military preparations, they had missed the most important thing about human nature. Humans always planned for the worst-case scenario. For 5 years, human commanders had been quietly preparing for the possibility that their new alien friends might not be friends at all. They had hidden weapons caches on civilian ships. They had trained colonists in military tactics. They had prepared evacuation plans for every major settlement. Most importantly, they had never fully trusted anyone but themselves. Sarah's warning reached human space 47 minutes later. Across 7 star systems, humans began moving with practiced efficiency. Military commanders activated hidden weapon systems. Colonial governors ordered immediate evacuations. Transport ships that had been carrying mining equipment suddenly revealed concealed armor plating and defensive weapons. When Chancellor's deadline passed, he sent a simple message to the Council fleets that had been waiting in nearby systems. Implement quarantine protocols. The attack began 3 minutes later. Council warships emerged from hyperspace around every human world simultaneously. Their weapons charged and shields raised. They expected to find panicking civilians and overwhelmed military forces. Instead, they found humans who had been preparing for this moment for years. The first Council ship to die was a cruiser that attacked the colony transport Harmony. The transport's captain, Maria Santos, waited until the alien ship was close enough to guarantee a hit. Then she activated the fusion charges that had been hidden in her cargo bay. The explosion vaporized both ships instantly, but it also sent a message to every human in the system. The war had begun. What followed was unlike anything the Council had ever experienced. Human ships that should have surrendered instead fought with desperate fury. Civilian transports revealed hidden weapons and attacked Council warships before fleeing. Colonial militias emerged from hidden bunkers and began guerrilla attacks on Council ground forces. The humans were losing, but they weren't giving up, and they were making the Council pay a price in blood for every victory. As Admiral Sarah watched the battles from the bridge of the UES Defiance, she sent one final message to Earth. "The Council has shown its true face. We are at war. Remember us." Then she gave the order that would haunt the galaxy for years to come. "All ships, execute Protocol 7 Alpha. Scorched Earth tactics are now authorized. If we can't have these worlds, no one can. Doctor floated in zero gravity, staring at the data screen that showed impossible numbers. Around her, the massive shipyard called Exodus hummed with activity as thousands of human refugees worked to build something the galaxy had never seen before. 5 years had passed since the Council's betrayal. 5 years since humanity was driven from their homes and forced to flee into the empty space between galaxies. 5 years of survival in the cold darkness, far from any sun or planet. But humans were good at surviving impossible situations. "The quantum field generator is working," reported Dr. James, floating beside with a tablet full of technical readings. "We can phase matter through solid objects at the quantum level. In simple terms, our torpedoes will pass through enemy shields like they don't exist." Nodded, making notes on her own tablet. She had once been a peaceful researcher studying alien biology. Now she was the leader of Project Humanity's plan for total war against the Council. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Council had tried to destroy humanity because they were afraid of human adaptability and creativity. Instead, they had created exactly what they feared most: a human military force with nothing left to lose. "What about the gravitational pulse cannons?" asked. Doctor grinned. "Even better. Instead of trying to break through enemy armor, we compress it into a singularity. The ship basically eats itself from the inside out." Looked through the observation window at the ships taking shape in the construction bays. They looked nothing like traditional human vessels or Council designs. They were something entirely new, built specifically to kill the beings who had destroyed human civilization. The refugee fleet that had escaped the Council purge had carried more than just people. Hidden in the data cores of scientific vessels and military ships was the Prometheus Archive, humanity's most classified research projects. Weapons that were too dangerous to build. Technologies that were too radical to test. Theories that were too terrifying to pursue. Until now. Admiral Sarah floated into the laboratory, her face showing the strain of 5 years in exile. She had aged decades in the time since the Council's betrayal. The responsibility of keeping humanity alive in the void had worn her down, but it had also made her harder than steel. "Status report," she said simply. Turned to face her. "We're ahead of schedule. The new ships will be ready for testing in 3 months. Full production can begin 6 months after that." "And the biological weapons?" His expression grew dark. "That's where we've made our biggest breakthrough. The Council species are all very old, genetically stable. They've had the same DNA for millions of years. That stability makes them vulnerable to targeted attacks." She activated a holographic display showing genetic structures from all 12 Council species. "We've created that can identify specific genetic markers and rewrite DNA from the inside out. Each species will face a different pathogen, perfectly designed to kill only them." Admiral stared at the display. "How effective are they?" 100% lethal, replied. "Once deployed, there's no cure and no immunity. We can eliminate entire species while leaving others completely untouched." Was quiet for a long moment. "You understand what we're planning, don't you? This isn't war. This is genocide." His voice was cold as space. "They started it. We're just better at finishing it." The truth was that exile had changed humanity in ways the Council never expected. Living in the darkness between galaxies, with only the memory of betrayal to keep them warm, humans had become something harder and more focused than they had ever been before. The refugee fleet had originally carried 2 million survivors from 7 star systems, but humans bred fast, and children born in exile grew up with stories of the lost and the treachery of the Council. By the time project was complete, the human population had grown to over 5 million. All of them dedicated to a single purpose: revenge. Commander Maria Santos, who had destroyed the first Council ship with her suicide attack, had become a legend among the refugees. Her words before her death were painted on the hull of every new warship. They wanted to see what humans do when cornered. Let's show them. The construction of the Revenge Fleet was the largest project in human history. Every refugee, from the youngest child to the oldest survivor, contributed something to the effort. Scientists worked on new weapons. Engineers designed new ship systems. Even artists contributed by creating psychological warfare programs designed to break enemy morale. But the most important contribution came from the children. The generation born in exile had grown up surrounded by the evidence of Council treachery. They learned mathematics by calculating optimal firing solutions for new weapons. They studied biology by analyzing the genetic weaknesses of enemy species. They practiced teamwork by running simulations of fleet combat. They were raised to be warriors, and they were very good at it. Doctor often worked with these young people, teaching them about the biological weapons that would be their primary tool of revenge. She was amazed by how quickly they learned and how little mercy they showed for their future enemies. "Doctor," asked Maria, Admiral's daughter who had been born 2 years after the exile began, "will the Council species suffer when they attack them?" Considered lying, but decided the girl deserved the truth. "Yes. The process takes several hours and is extremely painful." Maria nodded thoughtfully. "Good, they should know what they did to us." The girl was only 7 years old, but her eyes held a coldness that would have terrified the Council leaders. This was what they had created with their betrayal, a generation of human children who saw alien genocide as justice. As the ships neared completion, Admiral called a meeting of all senior staff. The main assembly bay was packed with humans who had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. "The Council believes we're dead," announced to the crowd. "They think they solved their human problem 5 years ago. They've forgotten about us and gone back to their peaceful existence." She activated a holographic display showing the current state of Council space. Intelligence reports indicate they've grown complacent. Their military forces are scattered. Their defenses are minimal. They're not prepared for war because they think there's no one left to fight them. A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the crowd. "In 6 months, we'll remind them that humans don't forgive and we don't forget," continued. "We'll show them the price of betrayal, and we'll make sure that no species ever again makes the mistake of underestimating humanity." The crowd roared its approval. 5 million voices united in purpose. Doctor looked around at the faces surrounding her. Scientists who had become weapons designers, engineers who had become military strategists, children who had been raised to be soldiers. This wasn't the same species that had joined the Council with hopes of peace and cooperation. The Council's betrayal had forged humanity into something new, something harder, something infinitely more dangerous. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what humans became when they had nothing left to lose. The first sign that something was wrong came when the border monitoring stations went silent. One by one, the automated systems that watched the edge of Council space simply stopped transmitting. No alarms, no distress signals, no warnings, just empty static where there should have been regular status reports. Chancellor stood in his private office on Nexus Prime, studying the reports with growing unease. In the 5 years since humanity's elimination, the galaxy had been more peaceful than ever. No conflicts, no threats, no problems that couldn't be solved with careful diplomacy. So why did he feel like something terrible was about to happen? "Chancellor," his aide announced through the communications system, "we're receiving reports of missing ships along the outer rim. 7 patrol vessels have failed to check in." Four eyes narrowed. "Pirates?" "Unknown, sir. The ships simply vanished. No debris, no distress calls, nothing." As the reports continued to arrive, a pattern began to emerge. Something was moving through Council space, eliminating anything in its path with surgical precision. Not destroying randomly like raiders or pirates, but systematically removing every council presence from an expanding area of space. "Sir," the aide's voice was now urgent. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures moving toward the core systems. Whatever it is, it's big, and it's coming fast." Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in his office. He had lived for over 300 years and had seen many threats to the council, but something about this felt different, personal. The answer came 18 hours later when humanity's revenge fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system. Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Nemesis, looking out at the sight she had dreamed of for 5 long years. Before her lay Nexus Prime, the heart of Council civilization. The crystal spires that had once seemed so beautiful now looked like tombstones waiting to be carved. Her fleet stretched out behind her in perfect formation. 300 ships of war, each one designed for a single purpose, the complete destruction of the Galactic Council. The largest vessels were bigger than anything the Council had ever built. The smallest were still more heavily armed than most Council battleships. But size wasn't what made them dangerous, it was what they carried. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the weapons station, "all ships report ready for deployment. Biological weapons are loaded and targeting systems are locked on Council worlds." Nodded, "Open a channel to Nexus Prime." The main screen flickered to life, showing Chancellor's shocked face. Behind him could see emergency lights flashing and the chaos of a command center suddenly facing an impossible situation. "Chancellor," said, her voice carrying easily across the void, "you look surprised to see us." The old alien struggled to compose himself. "Admiral, this is unexpected. We were told that your species had been successfully relocated to more suitable territories." Laughed, and the sound was colder than the space between stars. "Relocated? Is that what you call genocide now? How civilized of you." "Admiral, surely we can discuss this situation like reasonable beings. The Council has no desire for conflict with." "You had your chance to talk 5 years ago," interrupted. "You chose genocide instead. Now you get to see what humans do when they have nothing left to lose." More Council ships were arriving in the system now, called back from patrol duties and border stations. They formed a defensive line between the human fleet and Nexus Prime, their energy shields glowing with power. It was an impressive display of military might. It lasted exactly 97 seconds. Gave a single word, "Fire." The quantum phase torpedoes struck first. Council shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and stop kinetic projectiles, were useless against weapons that existed in a different quantum phase. The torpedoes passed through the energy barriers like they weren't there and struck the hull beneath. The explosions were spectacular. Each torpedo carried the destructive power of a small star, compressed into a space no larger than a human fist. Council ships that had survived for centuries simply vanished in brilliant flashes of light. But the real devastation came from the gravitational pulse cannons. Instead of trying to destroy the Council ships, the weapons created localized gravity wells that compressed matter beyond its breaking point. Massive battleships that had taken decades to build were crushed into balls of superdense matter in seconds. The Council fleet broke and ran. Ships that had never retreated in their entire service history turned and fled toward hyperspace. But the humans had planned for that too. Gravity mines, invisible and undetectable, had been seeded throughout the system during the initial attack. As Council ships tried to escape, they found themselves trapped in artificial gravity wells that prevented hyperspace jumps. One by one, they were hunted down and destroyed by human fighters that moved faster than anything the Council had ever seen. The battle was over in less than 2 hours. 300 Council ships destroyed, 0 human casualties. But wasn't finished. "Deploy the biological weapons," she ordered. Across the system, human ships launched millions toward every Council world. The tiny machines were invisible to sensors and immune to defensive systems. They fell through the atmospheres of 12 different planets like deadly rain. On the hegemony, Chancellor felt the first symptoms as he tried to evacuate his government. A burning sensation in his lungs, followed by weakness in his legs. Around him, other members of his species were collapsing as their genetic structure was rewritten from the inside out. They were perfectly designed killers. They recognized hegemony DNA and began systematically destroying it, cell by cell. The process was slow and agonizing, giving each victim time to understand what was happening to them. On the crystal worlds of the living structures themselves began to dissolve as biological weapons attacked their quantum crystalline matrix. Beings who had lived for thousands of years screamed in frequencies that shattered their own cities as they died. The Oran, masters of genetic manipulation, tried desperately to create a cure for the plague that was destroying their people. But the human adapted faster than any cure could be developed, evolving new attack methods faster than the Oran could respond. One by one, the Council species faced extinction, not from random disease or natural disaster, but from weapons specifically designed to kill them and them alone. It was genocide elevated to an art form. Chancellor used his last moments to send a message to Admiral. His voice was weak and distorted as his throat began to dissolve, but his words were clear. You've become monsters," he whispered. "This is not justice, this is madness." His response was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring that every surviving being in the galaxy would hear it. "You taught us to be monsters," she replied. "You showed us that peace is a lie and mercy is weakness. You wanted to see what humans become when they have nothing left to lose. Congratulations, Chancellor, you succeeded." The transmission from Nexus Prime ended as the planet's atmosphere was consumed by the biological weapons. In the aftermath, stood among the ruins of the Council fleet and surveyed her victory. 12 ancient species, reduced to extinction in a matter of hours. The most powerful alliance in galactic history, destroyed by the species they had tried to eliminate. Only a few Council species survived. The youngest members, those who had joined after humanity's exile, were spared as witnesses. They would carry the story of this day to whatever civilizations remained in the galaxy. The message was simple: Earth remembers its children, and Earth's justice is absolute. The Great Peace was over, the age of humanity had begun. And the galaxy would never forget the price of betraying the human race.